Hello everybody, good afternoon. Beautiful day here in New York City, isn't it? So my name is Mandy Drury from CNBC, and Jonathan, thank you very much for the introduction there. I think the numbers just speak for themselves. They tell a very vivid story here. So, women constitute half of the workforce, in many cases more than half of the workforce. More than half of college diplomas are held by women, and yet there are only 24 women that are leading Fortune 500 companies, only 24. It's absolutely incredible, and obviously the share of female leaders really hasn't changed very much in the past 3 years, even though, we have made progress over the decades before. So I guess the question we're trying to tackle today is, how do we break that plateau? No one's going to put a woman in a leadership position just because, well, it's nice to even things up. We don't do these things just out of the goodness of our heart. It has to make dollars and cents, if you'll excuse the pun. And it does. We're going to talk about that today. It makes good business sense, it makes good shareholder value sense, and it also better mirrors a company's customer base and its employee base. So we have here today Amanda at the end there, Allison, and Caroline. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to start off with a more macro topic here, and that is basically just what your methodologies are for growth and innovative leadership, and whether or not those methodologies differ from your male peers, and if so, why? Amanda, would you like to kick it off for us?
It's a fascinating question, because I work obviously at HSBC, which 250,000 employees globally, and 50% of those are women. But when you go up to the leadership level, that number dwindles. It goes from 50% to probably about 18%. And I think that that's a big issue that we are trying to tackle as a business, because we know it absolutely makes economic sense to do that. You've only got to look at our customer base, especially as we were talking about just now, the millennials. It's not only the millennials, the majority of purchase decisions are made by women. It is a fact. And actually, as you go, even the generation 50 plus, it's 90% of the decisions are made by women. So we've got to do this from a pure economic point of view. It's really essential. Mm-hmm. But I do think we've got to try and also tackle why do we have this amazing workforce where 50% are women, and yet they don't go on to those senior roles? And I don't always believe it is the organisation's fault. I think there is also a bit about the ambition of those women to also go forward. Mm-hmm.
Can you explore that a little bit further?
Yeah. But I think and I see it a lot. I did a panel the other day. I had 30 women in the room. It was great. We were having a good old chat, and the girl sitting next to me said, "Oh, I don't know whether to go for the promotion because I think I want to have a baby." Mm-hmm. And you sat there, and I had to sit there and say, "Well, why will that stop you? It won't stop you. In fact, you shouldn't even be considering that." I have 3 children. I don't think I ever thought it would ever stop me doing that. Mm-hmm. I think it's a mindset shift. So we've got to try and make sure that that we'd start to tackle those issues. And I think a lot of that is around unconscious bias. I think a lot of it is both unconscious bias from the women and the men, actually.
I think the notion of unconscious bias is a really important one. And as you say, it's entrenched not just in men, but in women as well. But how do we break that cycle of unconscious bias, Allison?
I think that I get asked this question a lot, how does she do it and all those. And I'm like, well, I'm a human being. I do it the same way you do. I wake up, I put a skirt on instead of pants, and I go to work.
Right.
And so I feel like we suppose that the life experience of a female is different than the life experience of a man, and it's not. I'm a human being. I have to eat meals. Mm-hmm. I have to get from point A to point B. I have to make decisions. I have to not regret them. I have to move forward. It's not a girl thing or a boy thing. It's a human thing. And so the more that you can just behave like your peers instead of like your female peers, you're inevitably going to earn the right. Somebody said to me, Sheryl Sandberg says you have to lean in, and she said, how do I lean into a table I'm not invited to?
That's a good point.
I said, that is beautiful, I'm going to remember that. But also, it's your responsibility to sit at the table. And I was at a session in Columbus, Ohio this week, 2 days ago, and two of the young ladies that organized the event sat on the wall and waited for the executives to take up the chairs. And I had to move them into there were plenty of chairs. It wasn't, deferential seating. It was just they thought I'm supposed to sit in the back. And I kind of made the joke, like, if you're American, that nobody puts baby in a corner. I said, get off the wall, ladies, literally and figuratively. And so I think we sometimes create that, in that, are we allowed to sit at the table? What happens when I say something? Is it okay? And
is it a worry about how they're going to be perceived, that maybe they're going to be seen as a little bit too like pushy or bossy or ambitious if they sort of take that first step?
Possibly, but I hope not. I hope it's more the case that that you have to, everything in businesses, you have to take a risk. So if you're not even afraid to sit at the table, or if you're fearful of sitting at the table, then you're definitely going to be fearful of saying what you think. And so we have to get them past that. So we have a lot of great programs. We have I told you about a program that when we first met, this program called Reentry, which I think is one of the neatest things ever. Do you know about this, right? Okay, so it's JPMorgan Chase has a program where midlife women who want to get back in the workforce, who took some time off, typically and stereotypically to raise family, we recruit this workforce, and we have a whole program to bring them back in because they stopped at this midpoint in their career for whatever personal reason, but now they find themselves needing or wanting to get back in, and we bring them in and we train them in, there were 500 applicants for something like 21 spots. This is a huge, untapped, awesome workforce that we need to do better at.
But do you think that there is enough support at the institutional level? And maybe you can also weigh in on this from the European perspective as well. Is there enough support at the institutional level for women to go back into the workforce, like in terms of adequate maternity leave or paternity leave, or flexible working hours, the ability to work from home, and all these kinds of things? You need to have that kind of infrastructure, I think, to a certain degree, to be able to allow a woman who does have career ambitions to get back into the workforce. What do you think, Caroline?
I do believe in France we do have tons of laws. That's something that we have. And we have a lot of very good law, actually, making sure that women are protected when they're coming back from maternity, or that, we have equal opportunity like you do have in different countries and in Europe and in the US. But I don't think that's enough. We discuss, what is preventing women from accessing to top jobs. Obviously, we need to make sure that they have equal opportunity, and that's, once again, laws are made for that. So I think that's great, but that's obviously not enough. You were referring to the bias that everybody has. At SocGen, so we are a company of 150,000 people all over the world, and one of the way we're looking at it is actually less on the just strictly women point of view than diversity point of view. And I'm a strong believer that if we look at the situation from a diversity point of view, we look at it a little bit differently. What I mean is that, for example, in a French company, and I'm sure it's the same in an American company, our problem is actually to have people that think differently. It's not a question of being a woman or a man or a Chinese or whatever. It's a question of having people that really look at the situation differently. And in the financial sector, we've been going through years of major crisis, and it's not over, and we know that. And I joined actually the company 5 years ago, and I'm an EXCO member. And I remember joining this EXCO and finding myself in front of, we were 13, and we're still actually 13, 2 women, the rest is men. But the real problem was actually that each of this person was actually thinking the same way. Same education, same background. They all did their study at the same places. They all actually been through the same banks. The standards professional career. And they were, when the situation were arriving, they were actually looking at the situation exactly the same way. And I believe that when you have people, and that's not only a question of women, but having international people joining the EXCO, we have a Spanish guy now actually in the EXCO, is just making it so different. And I believe that we will actually get people to be convinced about having more women on board in EXCOs and in different C-level situations. If we really look at it as what the problem, the issue is not being a woman, the issue is being different and just having a different look at the situation.
Yeah.
But tackling that unconscious bias is the critical thing that you have to do. And I think we said this when we've spoken before, I think you have to do that with some kind of intervention, because otherwise what continues to happen is that the people who are sitting on that EXCO still go and employ and promote the people that are like them.
Yeah.
So,
but where does that intervention come from? Is this something that needs to come from within the company, from the management level, from regulators, from the outside?
Not from
like
regulators.
Where is that intervention
Definitely not from regulators. No, I think it needs to come from the management decision. It really does. So I think it's got to be, for example, within the business I look after, or the two businesses I look after, it's actually about getting the women on the shortlists. And that's the first attempt, because actually what tends to happen is if you've got a vacancy, they go, oh, well, I know Joe Bloggs, he'll be wonderful. And actually what we need to say is, you know Joe Bloggs and here's Josephine Bloggs as well. Let's put them both on there and let's look at them and assess them for their merits. I think, we talked this morning about sponsorship. That's absolutely critical. I don't think it is about mentoring. I do think it's about who is that person on that board that knows you. So that is totally so critical, it's not true. But we've got to I think we're only going to do this if we start to do some interventions.
Allison?
We are formal and informal. We have a very intentional programmatic approach to this where if you have a senior level job, you must have a diverse slate of candidates to consider, and they have to go through the interview rounds. That's full stop, that's how we do it. And I'm sure that Jamie would be happy to share that, for me to share that information, because he wants people to know that this is how we behave. Informally, though, I'll tell you, my boss is the CMO at the firm, and she has 12 direct reports and 9 are women, which I think is pretty flippin' cool. But anyway, one of the things that she says, and I said, how did you do this? And she's a big sponsor of other women in the organization. And she said, whenever people are talking about talented people, organically I say, she really needs a bigger job. And I think that is, that's an organic, less formal, less structured way to force something that, if Kristen says this person needs a bigger job, I should lean in. I should listen to that, and I should do something about it, and I should meet her or him or whoever it is. And so I think that culture is sort of sweeping throughout the firm, because she talks about it openly, and lots of us do when we go on panels. And I've been at the firm 6 months. I've been on 11 Women on the Move events. It's just what we do.
Let me just come back on that, because I slightly disagree on the regulator job.
Do you?
Thank God, I'm not in favor of having more regulation. But I have to say, what happened in France 4 years ago is the fact that regulators looked at boards and of the major companies in France, and they looked at it and they said there was something like 10% women on this board, and that's a very bad situation. So they actually put a law in place that is asking all major companies, what we call the CAC 40 companies, to have 40% women on their board before 2017. If that's not the case, they get fined, and it's really heavy fine, and they can actually refuse the nomination of some of the board members. Wow. At the situation today is that something like 70% actually of the board have reached something like 30% women on boards. We are among the best in class because we have already 40%, and we're in 2015. And I think we need to be very clear. I'm not in favor of positive discrimination, right, but I'm in favor of positive action. And I think we need to push, because otherwise we're going to be in the same situation in 20 years, and it's not going to be moving.
But can that backfire on the woman, the heavy-handedness of regulation? You know, saying there must be a quota or we must have a target of X% of women on the board or in senior management for this company. Like, what are our views of targets and quotas? Because there's always the danger, and perhaps you can tell me, Caroline, whether you notice this at all in France. People say, well, she's only in that position because, well, there was a guy and there was a girl going for the job and they needed to fulfill their quota, so she got it.
Well, you're right. I think we have a lot of these reactions, but personally, I think I don't care.
Oh, you don't
because
care?
No, I mean, honestly, because I believe that if there's not a real policy to move, it's never gonna happen. And we made our calculations. At the beginning, my CEO was actually against everything that looked like quotas or positive discrimination, and he made just hypotheses and said, at this rate, we're going to have something like 30% in the leadership team in 2030. Okay? And he said it's too long to wait. So we're doing exactly the same way, and we're looking at the talent pool. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in the talent pool, making sure that when we have succession review, for example, we're making sure that the guys are coming with 3 names for each of the leaders that needs to be replaced. Among these 3 names, there need to be a woman. And it's not quotas. It's not, let's say, they have to be at a very good level. And all these women are at a very, very good level. But the fact of pushing these guys, and especially, I mean, we're talking about investment banking where it's extremely difficult to get women, and for a lot of good reasons also. But the fact of having, these 3 names, 1 out of them is women, I mean, we're moving very quickly in the right directions.
So Allison and Amanda, what are your views on that?
The board thing worries me, and again, because I think if I look at the UK, yes, they've increased the amount of women on boards, but they tend to be at the non-executive director level, so they're not the executives. And actually, what we really need to be driving up is the execs in the business, because the NEDs are, they're not really driving strategy; they're checking. So we really do need to be driving up those numbers. That's, I think, is absolutely critical. And I think the same thing happens in France. So in Norway and lots of all these good countries. But what they're doing is driving up the non-executive directors rather than the executives. So it's really about how do we start to push the executive careers more, because that's the critical thing. The other thing I feel as well is that I think in marketing, it's fantastic. I mean, 70% of my team is women. And actually, if you look at marketing, HR, communications, women really are up there. So there's absolutely no problem. It's how do we get them into the absolute business? How do we get them into the banking side of it and actually really start to push those numbers up? Because that's the critical piece where we'll make a real difference.
Allison?
Okay, two things I would say. First, I'm not supportive of quota. I'm a mother of 2 teenage boys, and I would never want them to lose a position because they didn't make the list, right? On the flip side, or in tandem with that, I have seen such a sea change. I've only been at the firm 6 months, but people talk about this like it's been going on for years, so it's not a new experience. At JPMorgan, we have 6 CEOs who run the consumer bank, 3 are women. Within the card business, Eileen Sarah has 3 presidents who run the 3 major card brands. All are women. Our newest CEO is a 40-year-old female running business banking. She has a $4.5 billion business and 5,000 employees. It just happens because talented people rise up. Our CFO, I mean, it's just, I think we're exceptional at this because of the cultural push from the leadership team and the behaviors like I described. So I think it can be done culturally. I don't have European experience to compare, but at least in our firm, it's one of the. I was happy to talk on this panel because I see it as something that we do well.
But do you see this as I don't want to say unique, but a rarer case?
I do think it's rare. I do think that when I went on this job interview, I really was thinking I was not going to want the job because I had in my mind a perception that they're not going to be interested in me as a candidate, and I knew my boss would be a female, but I didn't realize there would be so much support for a diverse group of candidates and people. And one of the things that you made the point, Caroline, about diversity, I think this was I love fun facts that I didn't know that kind of things that happen every day in my job, but 1 out of 8 small businesses in America is owned by a new American. How fascinating, right? And if
a new American being like an immigrant.
An immigrant.
Or an immigrant.
If we don't have a workforce that's running the business, not just in the support, that speaks their language, literally and figuratively, can understand, what it is like to break through cultural barriers, especially when it comes to the, unusual world of American finance, we're gonna fail. So we have to be supportive. We have to have people that are looking after our clients that look like, sound like, speak like, think like, and understand the situation of our clients. And so we know it's a business imperative rather than just a check the box quota. We don't ever talk about those as scorecards and things like that. It's just what we need to do.
Yeah,
I do think there's a supply issue as well. You see a lot of women drop out when they have children and they don't feel that they can sustain their careers. I think now with technology and all of the things that we have, I don't understand why you would drop out actually. Not unless you really want to stay at home and look after your family, and that's absolutely fine. That's great if you want to do that. But if you want to sustain your career, you've got more opportunity now to work flexibly and to work in a different way. You are
you work for Yahoo.
So lucky.
Unless you work for Yahoo and now you can't work from home.
Well, no, but in a way, but to be honest, what will happen to those kinds of organisations is people will choose not to work for them.
Right.
So, and I think, so when you start to think about the brand experience, Yahoo, who's going to want to work for them? Because as you go forward, there's going to be so much opportunity because of the way the workforce is going to be able to work. So all of you in the room, I think, have you have a role to play in actually changing that. You have a huge role to play. And I tell my team that as well, actually. So if you are a woman and you do have children, make sure you stay in touch with your business, even if you stay just to do it temporarily, even if you just come back for a bit. Just keep going. Don't send yourself down a cul-de-sac. A cul-de-sac's a very English expression, sorry, but but a dead end. Don't do that because you've got so many opportunities. I do think but supply issue I think is a really big thing because that's where the talent sort of falls out.
But I think you hit on a very interesting point, how technology and social media are radically changing the landscape. Would you say so as well in the sphere that you're working in, Caroline?
Yes, it is, and especially. But by the way, I think it's changing the way for everyone, and
everyone, absolutely.
And I think that we shouldn't be simplifying the subject by saying that only women would like to work differently in the workplace. Because when I discussed that with men, and we had a lot of debate actually inside the company about teleworking and all technology that you can use and the fact of doing remote working. Actually, we have as much men that are really appealing to have a different way of working than women. And I find that very interesting because I think that's going to help also because I don't think women wants to be stigmatized as being the only one working from home because they have to be at home because they're taking care of their children. And the fact of actually just making that a new way of working for the whole workplace is a good way to actually avoid having the men way and the woman way. And if I may, just wanted a slight thing on this quotas thing, because absolutely. I know that's a very touchy thing. We don't do quota per se. I mean, in my company, and we don't do it at all. So we don't have like 10 women that needs to be there. And the way we do that is we have a diversity board actually at the ExCo level. So it's ExCo and just below set of people. So men from business mostly that actually are in this diversity board. We have a dashboard, and this dashboard is actually just setting objectives to each of the business to actually have more diversity. So it's women and international type of profile on board. And so we did it at first and it didn't really work. So we looked at that and we said, okay, what can we do so that it works? And we know how people are very competitive. So we decided to actually have a review and have this dashboard being reviewed at the ExCo level. And just the fact of having bad numbers actually made the numbers look quite better. So we decided every 2 or 3 months actually to have this review at the exco level, and I have to say that it's extremely interesting because, and at the same time, what we're doing is having a set of women, the talent pool, that specifically women that we're reviewing actually at the exco level, and it's a way also to look at people that we don't know, that, as you said, that we don't have maybe on our radar because they're far away in the organization, and just making sure that they have a progression in the company that they deserve. And once again, excellence is the word. So we're not looking at women because they're women, but we're looking at very, very good women that needs and deserve to be at good situation.
Yeah, okay. We're at the halfway mark, so before I keep on going with the panelists, is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Or even make a comment? Absolutely. Would you like to stand up? Tell us your name.
Melissa.
Hi, Melissa. Where are you from?
Venezuela.
Oh, yeah. No, or company? Or company.
And a woman.
Great.
My question is, who were your mentors and how did they influence your careers?
Oh, good question.
Who'd like to take that?
I had one that was a 60-year-old man. And who's the first person to come to mind, but I started at a Southern bank. Actually, I started at Chase, but the majority of my career was in the South at a bank called SunTrust. And I had a fantastic mentor, and the reason that he was a great mentor was I always felt like I had permission to fail. And I would say his name is Jenner Wood, and he deserves a shout out. But one of the things that I think he instilled in his team was he showed all his scars. He was very human. If he made a mistake, he talked about it openly, and he said, "Yeah, I did that too." Or don't make the same mistake I did. I see you going down that path. That's not going to end well, because here's what happened to me. So he's very human. He told stories about his kids all the time. He was one of the first guys who would go to his kids' baseball game, and you didn't have to do the, "Oh, isn't he a fantastic dad?" Whereas if the woman went to the baseball game, it was, "Oh, she's cutting out early." He set the tone and the culture that parents are people. We're spouses and citizens and parents first, and then we work second. And so I modeled that behavior. And there was a period in my career when I kind of relaxed, and I did not take the next promotion. And he said, "I'm glad you're going to sit in this job because you're sort of freaking me out, because I kept wanting the next job." And he said, "Good, I was so glad your kids met elementary school, because I knew that, and you told me that you wanted to relax, because that's good for us too." And so he gave me permission to relax and do a job well, not jump through the next hurdle, over the next hurdle. So he was a great mentor. My mentor now is my boss now, who's just facilitated my entree into the company in just such a fantastic way. In 6 months, I know hundreds of people.
Female or male?
She's a female. She's the one who says she needs a bigger job.
But your original mentor was a guy.
Was a man, 60-year-old
And I think
man.
that's a really interesting point here, that just because you're a female does not mean that you have to have a female sponsor or mentor within the company. And in my own personal experience, I'm sure all the women in the room here have experienced that quite often a woman in a senior position to you can be quite mean, because they can sometimes feel vulnerable or threatened by, say, someone who's got any talent or ambition. So sometimes it's, I think, good maybe to have a male mentor who can sort of just step outside of the gender role there, if you get what I mean. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I've got lots of mentors, but the one that sticks in my mind is I picked somebody who I was absolutely terrified of. Absolutely terrified, and he was a big banker, and sorry, but because we are them, yeah, big banker, and obviously I was looked after marketing, so I was way down on his list, and I asked him if he would mentor me, and he was so shocked that I'd asked him, and he basically sat there and taught me all about banking, but the thing that he taught me more than anything was how to navigate. And if you can't navigate big organisations, you're sort of dead in the water. So, and that's what you have to do. And just little things that he told me to do around how to sort of get my ideas heard, how to influence people, absolutely crucial. And he's a very, very good friend of mine now, which is great. And I still work with him.
That's great. Any more, before we move on, any more questions at this point? Yes, hi there. You want to stand up and tell us your name and where you're from?
My name is Victoria. I'm from Manulife, Canada.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi. I was wondering when you were speaking about, I'm a little bit past this in my life right now, but thinking of some millennials that I mentor. When you said it's not necessary to think about having to step back when you're going to start having children and take a bit of time away, I definitely felt like that at the time. When I was going on mat leave, which I think we all know is a little bit longer in Canada. But as executives, I'm wondering, what could you do to help bridge the gap? If I'm a high performer at your company and I want to take that time as a new mom, but I still want, obviously, the company to move forward, how can you fulfill what I was doing while I'm away so that I can come back right where I left off?
Okay, I'll tell you what I do with my team already. I've got, I must have about 5 people on maternity leave at the moment. And we do a program where continually we're talking to them, we keep them updated with everything that's going on. We bring them back in for events if they want to. If they don't want to do it, then fine. I even promoted one girl when she was on maternity leave, actually. So, because to me it's irrelevant, actually, because she's a really talented individual. I want her to come back. So I think it's about how you make sure that you keep those people in the loop. I've got another lady at the moment who's decided to take sabbatical. Again, the same thing. What we've done with her is she wanted to sort of improve her digital skills. So we've paid and supported her to do that, but she's on a sabbatical. I think you've got to ask for things. You really have. Don't expect everybody just to give it to you. You've got to say, look, I'm going to do this. I still want to be involved. What can, I'm willing to do this. What can you do to help me? But that's what I do with my team.
Okay, I'll leave time. Oh, sorry.
I think one of the things that, as a leader, I like people to bring me solutions, not just problems, right? So if you were to say, here's my situation, I need 8 months or 4 weeks or whatever you need to go to Tibet or to have a baby, whatever you want to do personally, and here's how I'm going to address the gap. Then we're having a dialogue rather than me going, oh my gosh, she's leaving, I have 8 weeks, and I need to get this thing launched. And so you could potentially say, so that's good. I would like for that to happen in September. So here is my plan. I've partnered up with Sally and Joe, and and those are 2 people that you told me you wanted to develop as my succession plan anyway. This is a great opportunity to stretch them. And stuff like that happens all the time, organically or formally, but the people that solve their own challenges and don't just dump it and walk are, and stress me out, right? Because then I've got to solve it and do the work, and then I'm, stressed out because I'm doing it on Saturday if you said, here's how I can solve that, and it actually is a winning situation because now I've got 3 people who know how to do your job, not just you, everybody wins because the other 2 people just learned something, and I've got a cross-trained team. That's great. I would love that. And so those sorts of things are what teammates can do to help us help you. And I've been the master of that. I had a friend that our children are 18, 16, 15, 12. Do the math. We did each other's jobs while we were in that, and her name's Trisha, and Trisha and we still have Thanksgiving together 20 years later. Because we were just symbiotic in that. Oh, well, Allison's going out because she's pregnant and Trisha's stepping in and vice versa.
It's so important, isn't it, to have these strong relationships within the company to be able to support each other. Caroline, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to rebound on something that was said about the fact of, and that's something that I'm seeing in women that I'm mentoring at the moment, is the fact of being explicit about things. Yeah. And sometimes we have a tendency, and I don't want to say like women and men different, but it's true that I'm seeing a lot of my colleagues that are male, and when they want a promotion, they go for it.
Yes.
And they go and see the boss and they say, by the way, this job, it is for me, I want it. I don't see my female colleague doing that. And it's the same for maternity leave, by the way. I mean, and it's a little bit different because in France, we are protecting, the law is protecting a lot the women that are leaving, and there's a lot of rules. But anyway, it happens. You come back, their job is no longer there, and you have a different job. And I think that the situation where you talk to your boss and you explain exactly, how motivated you are in having, in continuing in the position. And by the way, with the technology also, keeping touch with the company is extremely important. And I totally agree with, what you said on the fact of having this connection with even, if you want it, is having this connection and making sure that you're not completely out of, you don't know what happened in the financial sector during the last 4 months, which is a problem. But really being explicit, I think that's something that we need to work on much more.
We do need to work on it. I find as a woman, it's very difficult to go in and say, well, these are my strengths, because it sounds cocky. It feels cocky for a woman to do that. Whereas I watch my male colleagues do it all the time.
And even asking for a raise. That's something we should work on.
Yes, we should all work on that. I'm going to leave time for a couple more questions at the end of the panel. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask all three of you, perhaps Caroline, you can start, whether you notice that female leaders in your organization lead in a different way. They might focus on different things. They might perhaps invest in a different way because of the different mindset. Do they lead through more emotion, like appealing to your hopes and your desires and confronting your fears? Like, what differences do you see, and are they effective?
What I see is really a major difference in the projection that we're making in long term. So once again, I don't like generalizing on this kind of things, but have to say, and I'm saying from examples in my company, is that when I have a discussion with my other ExCo members, I will have people in front of me that will be really much talking about results today, tomorrow, quarterlies, what kind of business we're doing, and the impact of this business in the long term. They're not that interested in.
So it's very short term.
Very short term. And what we're bringing with my colleague at the ExCo, the other female, is really a situation where we're always asking a lot of questions about, well, guys, are you really looking at the long-term situation, and is it the right decision compared to what kind of impact it's going to have in the future? The second thing that I'm doing, and it is very interesting because we're all going through digital transformation that is major, and digital disruption, and actually. We drove with my colleague Françoise, we drove the digital transformation. Actually, we started it, and we started talking about it to the ExCo. My background is in telecom, so obviously it was easier for me, but also I think we had a tendency also to be a little bit more into the change management and into accompanying the employees into this change. But once again, it's not a question of being a woman. It's really a question of thinking a little bit differently. And maybe it's as much my background, as much my education, as much my origins or whatever that is making me different than being a woman. So, and what is extremely interesting is the mix. So I don't believe that an ExCo with only women would be a good idea. I do believe that in ExCo, when we have diversity, people very different, thinking very differently, that's the key to success. Gender, ethnicity, background, whatever. I mean, that's just the way you look at the world has to be very different.
Absolutely. Amanda?
I think women are really lucky, actually.
Lucky? Oh, lucky.
No, not nutty, lucky. I think we are lucky because, I sit on an ExCo board. There's only 3 of us, 3 women out of 20. And I think to your point, there is a bit where I think sometimes the men have to behave a certain way because that's the way they've grown up. Whereas we're quite lucky because we can come in and be a bit more disruptive. And normally are, because we can. And actually, it's quite hard for them to do that, I think, sometimes. So I think breaking down some of these sort of unconscious bias pieces is our job to do. And actually, if we can help some of our male colleagues as well, I think then that's great, because then you can end up with a diverse board. I strongly believe in diversity of thought rather than what the people look like around the room. And diversity of thought has got to be the most critical thing that we've got to get to.
That's a very important point. And Allison?
I think that we are, I would agree with my panelists. It's really about leadership qualities, not female qualities or male qualities. You know, people who make you laugh, people who get you to think. I think one of the things that that's interesting about having so many female leaders in marketing is we're moving more towards the expense side of the house to being the revenue leaders. And just changes in the language. You know, someone might put I have a phrase that I use in the firm. I guess if you're not American, you might not know what a deck is. Do you guys use that word deck? Like when you make a document?
Yeah, we use deck,
PowerPoint.
yeah.
And I call it the DMZs, which is a deck minimal zone. Right? We are not allowed to go through pages where you need to talk about emotional things and why people buy, and then the strategy will follow, but there's a conversation. If you read a deck to me, or if I read a deck to my peers, that's a fail, because we are validating what we're saying before we even decide what we're going to do, or think about what we're going to do. So women tend to have a conversation first and get strategy aligned, I think, or good leaders, not just women. And that is more effective to me. And tethering it back to the company has to make money, the company wants to make good financial decisions, lifelong relationships, long term. We want a lifelong relationship with the firm rather than a quick hit. But how that monetizes, as long as we are tethering it back to the financials, the company will be successful, we will be successful. I don't think it's a female thing. I think it's a human thing.
A human thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a question again from the audience. Hi there.
Hi there. Thanks for your time today. My name is Erin Meyer, and I'm from BlackRock. Manda, to your point earlier, when someone does have a young family, there really isn't a reason to have to push pause on their career if they don't want to, because the technology exists to keep us all connected. We even heard earlier today here you're going to be able to pay for goods with a wristband pretty soon. But what I've noticed in financial services is that there doesn't necessarily exist the cultural infrastructure to allow for that technology to be part of your everyday job, to get that job done, and to do so in a way that allows you to be both a great wife, mother, and employee. So how are you all helping to influence that cultural infrastructure so that when someone does come to their manager, and perhaps they're not lucky enough to have a forward-thinking manager like yourselves and present the solution to help cover their gap, that it's not seen as an exception or this arduous process to get it approved, but that's something that can be done, and where achieving goals and hitting milestones and being an innovative thinker is more valuable than just face time in the office as seen to getting your job done.
But I suppose within my organisation, I've led that piece. So if you looked at my team, you're right, it is a cultural thing. So if you look at my team, I've got so many people that work flexibly. I mean, there's all sorts of things going on. But it works really, really well. Now, I sit within the business, and actually what they've seen is that my engagement figures have gone up, which means I get more productivity, which means I've got happier people that work for me, and all of those good things happen. If a leader can start to show that to the business, and then that permeates through the whole of the company, then you start to make change. So, and it is a leadership, it is definitely a leadership piece that you have to get cracked. I will not, I work at home 1 day a week, and I quite often get, oh, Amanda's on holiday today, or she's having one day, and I just argue it all the time. And actually I no longer care. By the way, and I don't care, because I know that I'm working, I know that my team work when they say they're at home, I have no issues with it. But you've got to find somebody in your organisation that's going to champion this and go and attach yourself to them and make it happen.
But to your point, sorry. I was going to say, to your point about finance, I mean, not every industry is created equal. There are some industries that are better suited to teleworking than others. I mean, just as a quick poll, hands up in this room if you have teleworked or telework at the moment, okay? And keep your hand up if you feel it's been effective, just as effective as being in the office. Okay, good. There you go.
Yeah, just actually, we decided to launch a major program called Digital for All, and we're actually supplying 90,000 tablets to our employees this year. And one of the ideas was actually twofold. First is, that for security reasons, it's extremely difficult to have open internet on our PCs just because of all the restriction and so on. So actually on this tablet you can have everything, and social media and LinkedIn, of course. But on top of that, it was actually a way for everyone to get their emails and all the documentation, everything that is not confidential, of course, actually on their tablet. And that's actually helping getting managers understanding that you can have your employees working from home whenever they want. So I think it's coming from a different industry, which is the telecom, where teleworking is very spread. When I arrived, I found it very difficult, actually, because I found it a little bit old-fashioned way of managing people. You know, you have to have your team around you, otherwise, you know, people in the working, they're on holidays. But with this program, actually, it's really changing the way even managers are looking at their employees, and you know, I hope it's going to work. But so far, it's so good. Yeah, so we'll see.